My name is Teresa Ficklin. I have been teaching for the past 16 years in Memphis, Tennessee. I have worked with children all over Memphis, Frazier, and currently I am at Hanley in Orange Mound. I've been there for the past 5 years. Being at Hanley and being in Orange Mound has really pushed me to think outside of the box and really focus on what I can do inside the classroom as well as in the community. So recently I published a book titled I Am in Control, My Anger is Important. It is the first book of 10 in a series. My why behind this book is to really focus on helping children identify their feelings, to have their feelings validated in the moment, teaching children how to respond versus react, getting children to understand the importance of responding to get a positive consequence as opposed to reacting and having negative consequences. I feel that my curriculum, as well as the books, would benefit not just children in the classroom, teachers in the classroom, but as what families as well. My focus has been to really teach the social emotional competencies to all the children that I've had the opportunity to serve. The next book is My Wow is Important. We're not just focusing on negative feelings, but we're also trying to teach children how to be empowered by their positive feelings and to take action to what they feel as opposed to just feeling a certain way and then doing nothing. I have been working with illustrators to just really push the cultural responsiveness in the books to be relevant to children, just with the pictures as well as with the words. Everything that I have written has been through the lens and experiences of the scholars that I have had the opportunity to teach. So what I have done was basically take the experiences that children have given me and then written them into scenarios that teach them what they might do, but what they should do in a moment. I look forward to being able to share curriculum that's Memphis-based, that teaches the historical, like the rich historical events that have occurred in Memphis so that children can really tie in their history here, as well as understanding how people in the past have used their feelings to drive them to make changes in their community. I feel that if children are equipped with the right tools to be successful, starting with social emotional learning, it could really make a huge impact in their environments.
Hello, my name is Warren Wilson Jr., local Memphis engineer, author, and artist. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my 3 books. My first book was Brown Money. Teaches young black kids basically the basics of investing, gives them a taste of what the STEM world is like, introduces them to technology, things of that nature, and also filled with a lot of life lessons. My second book, Royal Council, right here is basically a book that I wrote that was dedicated to my mothers and grandmothers, and also, pretty much every woman in my family. They're very important to me, so I wanted to do a book that kind of, shouted them out, gave appreciation to a lot of the good words they, gave me growing up, that kind of helped me bring me through tough times. My third book, which is Brown Money 2, continues the story of Jay from Brown Money 1, and basically his father continues to basically teach him about investing, future investing opportunities, as well as gives him a deeper look into engineering. His father's an electrical engineer, and in the book he has created a new device that will shock the world. So I definitely would advise you all check it out. And so what is I get asked all the time, what is my motivation for writing the stories that I create, for young readers? And I would say my motivation is basically, I think of myself as a younger kid, and I also think of my younger siblings, and I try to give back information that would have helped me a lot at that age, and information that I could use to carry on for the next, 10 to 20 years or so. So I try to keep the youth in mind whenever I write my books, and I try to put, nuggets and good pieces of information that they can use, if not the next week, but, in the next 10 years of their life. And I feel like this is important because a lot of the times, a lot of kids aren't lost, or they aren't, I guess, ignorant to as many things as it seems. They just need it to be broken down into a good way. They need it to be broken down into the simplest form possible. So I try to basically, take these things that they probably would more so learn in their adolescence or early 20s, and I try to, break it down and put it into simply easy to digest format, so that the reader will actually be able to kind of understand the things that on the way to them in life coming up. And so when it comes to basically, making sure that my content is culturally responsive, I also feel like that is very important, because a lot of times in the Black and brown community, it's not that we don't, have the same opportunities. A lot of times it's just that we don't have the information, or the information is not hand to us, as easily readable or, easily accessible as it needs to be. So I try to make sure that I, in my books, show images of people of color, Black and brown, so that they see a face that they can relate to. When they look at these images and somebody looks similar to their father or their uncle or brother, it usually helps them to relate even more, and it helps that story to absorb more, into their subconscious, and they usually take in more of the lessons that I want to, to get across to them. So, I try to make, my images pretty much, tailored to the Black and brown community, so that, they basically, have a, it's a good image, it's a good symbolism for them to kind of fall back on as far as these topics, because usually we either never learn some of these topics that I like to talk about, or, we learn about them once it's too late. So my objective with my books and making sure that the imagery and the symbolism is very similar to Black and brown community, to those in the Black and brown community, is just to make sure that they always have images that they can relate to. So how do I distill this complex information, and make it, I guess, easy to read and easy to understand? Well, what I do is I try to, I take a lot of the topics or things I've learned basically in the last 5 to 7 years, and, I write it out, and I try to make it as simple as possible. And how do I do that? I go to the steps, and whenever I'm teaching or breaking down a complex topic, I try to look at all the things that I usually just assume, because I usually fall back on my own background and knowledge to, fill in those gaps. But, when you're trying to teach somebody something complex, it's not safe to let the assumption be made that they'll just understand. Those gaps, whenever you're explaining or teaching, those parts that you would assume, those are the parts you need to basically, give even more information and more, shed more light onto, because those are usually the points where people kind of get lost in translation and get lost in understanding. So, to do that, I just basically make sure that I break stuff down as simple as possible into, 1 by 2 by 3 steps. I try to keep it very simple and, very easy to read and understand. And I've always told myself, once I break down a topic or try to explain it, if I don't feel like it's, simple enough for somebody between ages 3 and 5 can understand, then I didn't do it well enough. So I try to break topics down as much as I can, and, as simple as I can. And, when my readers read these stories, I want them to, feel empowered. I want them to feel informed. I want them to feel like they took a piece of information that they can use in their everyday life, or, later on in life. So, and I use my artwork to basically keep the attention of the reader, so that, while they're absorbing this information, hopefully they're looking at something that they think is cool or exciting. And that usually helps to, keep their attention as they're absorbing this information. So, and I think that's very, very important, because you may not always remember what you were taught, but you'll always remember how something made you feel. And if I can basically, make sure that these images first convey over to something that'll strike an emotion in you, then you'll probably remember the words that are on the inside of the book later on. So that's usually my goal when I write my children's stories in my books, is to just make sure that they feel involved, make sure that they, feel some type of emotional connection with the book, and, make sure they're informed, of course, at the end of the day. So that's pretty much what I shoot for when I put out my content, especially to my younger readers, just to make sure that we always, keep some type of understanding.
Greetings. My name is Alice Faye Duncan, and today I would like to share a few thoughts with you about how I came to write my book, Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop. The reason that I write for young readers is because I want to explore those forgotten points in history that children should have in their educational experience. For example, so many children I found when I was teaching, so many children, they could tell you about Dr. King and Selma, they could tell you about Dr. King in Birmingham, and if they lived in Memphis, they could tell you that Dr. King was killed at the Lorraine Motel. But they could not tell you why was Dr. King in Memphis in 1968. They could not tell you why he was killed. And so when I looked at the holes or the gaps in the literature for children, I said, you know what? I live in Memphis. I'm from Memphis. I pass the Lorraine Motel every Sunday going to and from church. So I took it upon myself that I would write a book about Dr. King, the sanitation strike, and Dr. King's assassination. Now we are moving to the Q&A session. Please meet us in the next room.
And there is no next room, so you are in the correct room. But awesome. So we have like the social emotional like type book, the career technical book, the historical book, but just 3 amazing children's authors here today. So I'm going to give our audience a moment to, type in the chat their questions, but I do want to start, and Teresa, it's an education conference, so I have to start with our 5th grade teacher. What motivated you to write a series of books for your students when you were already, so busy just with the demands of being a full-time teacher?
And hello, everyone. My motivation for writing came from me trying to piece together on my own ways for children to express and handle feelings in the moments. So every time something would happen, I'm like, man, I should put that in a book. One of the things, especially with social emotional learning, that's like one of my strong areas in the classroom, just building culture, building relationships, because in the last 15 years of my career, the only way that I could make any difference academically is if I built a relationship with my children. So my children in my classroom are like my children at home. It's like I have to get to know each of you individually. I have to understand who you are. And so my motivation just came from, how can I give them a piece of me when they leave me? How can I continue this work that I do and make an impact with not just the children that I service every year, but with every child that I see, or other children around Memphis and so forth.
Awesome. And then Warren, full-time engineer, but also now author of 3 books. I'd love to hear you talk about kind of what inspired you to make that leap from engineering to writing. And then Alice, after him, I want you to bring us home with why you committed full-time to writing children's books.
I would say just wanting to find a way to give back. I've always kind of been in the art and engineering and basically taken over the last few years of my life after college and during college. So I found that the quickest way to basically, give back and, be able to pass information back forward and, pay it forward and, just provide insight and, a lot of knowledge that I've picked up over the last few years, especially as far as investing. And the more I learn about financial literacy and the deeper I get into STEM, I just find it very important for the next generation to be, well equipped in those areas. So, yeah, I would say that's pretty much, my motivations for us moving forward is just, wanting to pay it back forward and make sure that the next generation has those skills.
Okay, Benjamin, I do not write full-time, thank you. No, I'm an educator as well for Shelby County Schools. And this is my 29th year working in the schools. So no, I wish I could write full-time. But like Teresa, like Warren, I'm writing because I was inspired to. There was something that I saw. I've been writing since I was very young, and there was something that I saw, as I stated in the video, where there was a gap in the curriculum, right? And I thought, I'm from Memphis. Also, let me be very clear. I'm from a place called Parkway in Wellington. So that's in South Memphis. And during the 60s, there was one of the first African-American councilmen was Bishop J.O. Patterson Jr. And so he actually was one of those folks who helped during the strike to help the men get the pay raise. And so because J.O. Patterson had been my neighbor, because Ernest Withers had been my church photographer, because Henry Logan Starks, who was a strike strategist, had been my childhood preacher, just all those things came together, and I was like, oh, I feel like I should write this book. So just like Warren was at his job and he saw these things that were technical that brown and black kids were perhaps missing, he decided to write them. Just like Teresa is on her job, and social emotional learning is just so necessary and required right now. And she saw, hey, I need to write this because she understood it. Then it's the same thing, but mine just happened to be historical fiction. Because and it's directly related to the curriculum as well. And so yeah, same thing. Just I was inspired to do it, and that was my wheelhouse. So.
And thank you for the correction there. I think I just saw how many books you'd written, and
no. Writing doesn't pay. Ask Teresa and Warren. Writing doesn't pay.
Cool. So we do have our first question from the audience. And I'll let you guys kind of pick who takes this one first. Do you feel that parents, schools, and young readers have been receptive to your work? And is the response, what you've been expected?
I would say yes. I've done a few book readings now, spoken to a few schools, and you'd be surprised at the amount of questions and the type of questions you get after, reading your book or explaining certain topics or things like that. You'd be surprised at how much it actually soaks in and how much these things are actually on people's minds. So you can kind of sit there and relate to them and, I guess go back and forth with them, and they're actually willing to pick your brain. Like you start finding out that the things that you put into these books and that you give back to the community are things that they actually do want, that things that they actually think about and things that they need. So I think that the community has been very receptive, and I've honestly been surprised. 2 years ago, I just had the inspiration to write a book, and then, look now, I've met so many people through writing, these 40 pages worth of a book, and just meeting kids and explaining certain topics. So I think it's very rewarding as far as the receptiveness you get from the community. So
yeah. Well, I will say in terms of the reception, what I find is, and I'm sure Warren and Teresa, they probably having this experience as well. You're writing for kids, right? But what you inadvertently do is you also end up educating the parent and the teacher and the librarians who don't realize that, oh, you know what? I'm budgeting. This is a budgeting trick for me, or something about creativity and innovation, or something about emotional learning. Like, okay, as a parent, I need to go get somewhere and sit down and be quiet too, right? So, and same thing, Memphis, Martin, and Mountaintops. It's like, oh, okay, didn't really understand, like, particularly people who are not from the South, they don't really understand that Dr. King was killed in Memphis because he was here fighting for economic rights. They do not understand that Dr. King was on his way to Washington, D.C. To ask for a living wage. This is 50 years ago, right? If Dr. King had made it to Washington, D.C. 50 years ago to get that living wage, let me tell you, he was going to get it, because every time Dr. King had set out to do something, he had accomplished the goal. And so then I say in my book, well, this then is perhaps a hypothesis as to why Dr. King had to be killed, because now it was beyond coffee at a counter, right? It was beyond a bus ticket. It was about economics, and therefore the dreamer had to die. And so I find that the response is overwhelming. Yes, when kids get it, but also it's wonderful when adults or teachers say, oh my God, I need to share this book because While I thought I had all the wealth of knowledge, I don't. And this is one book that can share that knowledge, you know, with the children so that they don't have to then be without it for so long, like so many adults have been.
Cool. Joy, I want to get to your follow-up. And sorry, Teresa, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead. You can do the follow-up.
Yeah. But I want to add some context for anyone who's not aware in our audience. You know, we live in a great state, but a state that's recently kind of come under fire in the media for some legislation that could be seen as censorship of bringing discussions of race into the classroom. So I guess I'd love to hear not only your answers to the question, which is, you know, have you seen any resistance to your work, and how have you addressed it? But also, even if you haven't seen resistance actively, how do you kind of see your writing as a form of social justice in a city with so much need and where there's so much desire to like uplift our Black and brown students?
I can start. So for me, my books are not general, but they can impact any child in any school. It's not, the books are not Memphis based. It's the curriculum that's going to come with the books that we are working on that actually is going to be the Memphis based portion, like the Dr. Martin Luther King. Like, how do you take your feeling of when you're upset and you're mad and turn it into something positive that makes a change? So the focus for us was taking the feeling words that we want validated in that moment from anger, whether it's mad, it's frustrated, it's annoyed. How do you take it from being negative to actually applying it to what's going on in the moment to make it a positive? So for me, in my experience and where I'm at, a lot of my children just react. They don't think about the consequences. So the biggest impact that I can make is to get you to understand that, let me help you validate what you're feeling. Let me help you walk through the choices that you can make that can truly impact you in a good or bad way. And if you can do that in school, my hope is that you can do that in your community. And being in Orange Mound for me that's my heart right now, because that's where I am. And my biggest impact that I want to make is, how can I create children who go into their community that want to make a change as they get older, to make an impact, to make it somewhere that they feel confident, safe, that it's home. It's home to me, because I tell them this is where I come outside of my home. But how is this home to you when I'm not here? And so for me, I don't know. It's just, I don't really I understand, you know, the Black and the brown, but I also understand the reality of we all have the same feelings. And so this is what I push with my children too. Like, I don't know, there's a lot to say with that, but as far as my curriculum and resistance, I've learned to just bridge a gap with my families and with the community, especially as the outreach coordinator for Hanley, to just truly bring in everybody in all areas to support what we have going on at Hanley.
I will say that I'm thinking, Benjamin, that you're talking about the critical race theory and the laws that have been into place to say, okay, we can't teach critical race theory, even though no one is teaching critical race theory. But what it does is it makes people fearful of teaching Black history. It makes people fearful of highlighting Latin American Hispanic Month because they don't know, they don't understand what critical race theory is. And so then they don't know if they're teaching it or not. And so the safe side is just not to teach it. So I haven't found any teachers that seem so frightened. Have found some teachers who seem determined that despite the law, that they're going to go on to do the curriculum and the resistance teaching that they've already been doing. One of the ways that I try to make the work less threatening is that I incorporate a lot of the heavy things like assassination. I'm working on a new book now about Somerville and the Tent City movement. There's a poem that I have about lynching, right? Lynching on the surface, just on its own, would be very intimidating for a teacher to teach. But if I put my lynching discussion, I've put it in a poem, right? like a ghost speaking, very similar to Richard Wright in Between the World and Me, right? So I just incorporate a lot of poetry with the heavy, deep messages, because poems are rhythmic, they're like music, right? And so there's a lot you can that's more accessible, that's more that's easy to accept if you put it, you know, in the, it's like how you package something, right? Depending on the pill you take, right? It can be a horse pill, or you can put it in a plastic capsule and make it tolerable. So poetry is the plastic cap.
Yeah, and as far as myself, I haven't really experienced, I'll say, any resistance, or at least not yet. I guess I have gotten asked the question, why do my stories, I guess, cater more towards Black and brown communities, and more so with the, I guess, the financial literacy aspect of my book, since there is a wealth gap between certain ethnicities. I do try to bring light to that, and not only just light to it, but how to correct it and how to bring that gap closer together. But I'm pretty sure as I continue to promote and meet and network, I will, experience and more resistance for why should I hone in on such, one or two topics. Everybody might not appreciate those two topics that I like to hone in on, but I mean, hey, that's what writing is about. That's what journalism is about. That's what content is about. Some people are gonna love it, some people are gonna hate it, but I choose to speak to everybody, no matter how you feel about it, understand about it. But hey, life goes on. But it can always be positive. We can always learn from each other. You can learn from me and why my perspective is what it is, and I can learn from the other side and learn why their perspective is, what it is and the reasons why. So, it's always room for growth, and that's how I try to look at it. There's always going to be some type of difference or opposition, but I look at it as an opportunity to grow. So,
yeah, thank you. And Alice, you said something earlier that I love, which is that, when you write a book for a child, you're also educating their parent. And if a teacher brings that into their classroom, you're potentially also educating that teacher. So with that in mind, I'd love to get your thoughts. What else can teachers or parents do to supplement, their kids' school curriculum to make sure that they're getting that, culturally honest, authentic, well-rounded education?
Okay, so this is what when I speak to like parent groups, I always talk to the parents and I tell them, look, you're going to Walmart how many times during the week, right? You're going to the Family Dollar how many times during the week, right? And so if you've got this revolving relationship with Walmart, you got this revolving relationship with Family Dollar, then why not have a revolving relationship with the public library, right? So in Memphis is very rare in that Memphis has a public library in every single community you can name, right? And so I just recommend that if you're going to Walmart twice a week, then go to the library, take your child at least once a week, and then take them to the children's department. There's the librarian there who can do reader advisory, and then allow the children to read what they want to read. Because at school, you've got these requirements where you got to read Huck Finn, and you've got to read Wuthering Heights, and you got to read Frankenstein, right? But then when you go to the library, it ought to be a time of leisure where parents say, hey, it doesn't matter what you want to read, comic books, picture books, even if you're in high school and you want to read some kids stuff, then go ahead and do that. Just let the child be free to read whatever it is. Because here's the thing, the more you read, the better facility that your kid is going to have with language in terms of speaking, in terms of writing. I write books. I like the sounds of words. Sometimes I just use the $10 words because they just sound so melodious, right? But the more you're encountering books and you're seeing those words and kids are having to look them up because they don't know what they mean, then you're making a strong reader, you're making a strong, independent learner. You're making a lifetime learner. And ultimately, which is why I despise having to write argumentatively and persuasively in school, because ultimately, if a child is reading voraciously, then that might be the next writer in bloom, because that's how possibly a lot of writers began. They fell in love with books, fell in love with reading, and the next leap was, I think I'll write my own.
And yeah, so Warren and Teresa, maybe taking like kind of the, how can parents kind of supplement that financial understanding that they want to build in their student, or that kind of like emotional like control and understanding they want to build. What would you like a parent or teacher who's like kind of starting with your book to kind of build from that?
I would like them to build in the, I guess, the habits of teaching kids so that they learn closer to 18, 19, instead at like 10 or 11, as far as budgeting, what credit is, IRAs, 401ks, Roths, things of that nature, how to manage your money, how to invest your money, what the stock market is, what is real estate past a house, like just things of those nature. I would like, to see, after parents read my book, I would like them to flip through the page and say, hey, half this stuff I don't even talk about. So once my kid starts asking about it, hopefully that pushes parents and, guardians to research more and learn more on their own, so that when those kids circle back and ask those questions from the book, or, hey, what did he mean by this, or what did he mean by that? I'm hoping that sparks conversations for the next few years, as far as, all those topics go. So that's what I kind of hope for. I look for it to be almost like a fire starter for a lot of those hard to swallow topics. And, because if you can hit the topics earlier on, they're not as scary later on. So that's what I kind of aim to do with my books.
Kind of similar to where my books are as well, as far as like the vocabulary and the words, giving children the opportunity to express themselves, allowing families to kind of grow together with that SEL competencies, understanding what self-awareness is, self-management, responsible decision-making, helping them build relationship skills within their families, especially even though you would think, you look at the book, it might be K-5, but I have older children too. And so when my older children see it and they make that connection of, in this moment, I could do this, but I better do this because I think it builds a better person. Like, you truly can reach the whole child when you can give them words that they can use to validate how they feel, and they give them the options of what they could do. I tell people all the time, like, when a driver is mad and they cut you off, nowadays in Memphis, everybody's cutting everybody off. But like, in those moments, what could we do to do the right thing, even though somebody else is doing the wrong thing? And I just hope with each of the books that children can acquire the necessary vocabulary in terms of feelings, and differentiate between, we all have these emotions, but our feelings come up temporarily. They go away after a while. So once they go away, what have you done in that moment that you can't take back? So I just really hope that when families incorporated, that adults, teachers, whoever it is reading the book that is older, can also understand, like, we do these same things as grownups. The same way I'm reading it as to a child is exactly how it's applied when we're in the adult world. We just don't read it that way.
Yeah, and as you kind of talk about like the way you write the books, one thing that really jumped out at me when I read your books is that they don't look like the kind of very simple kids books I read when I was a kid, where every sentence is 4 words, it has to rhyme, and no word can be longer than 5 letters. So I think I'd kind of love to speak to that a little bit. We need about like pushing our kids and believing that they can, maybe learn more and handle more mature themes than what we always assume of students. I guess, yeah, how do you kind of set the standard for what you're going to write and make it accessible to them?
What I do is I'm not starting off with a vocabulary. I'm trying to do what I want the student to do, which is to make the right word choice for that particular mood, tone, whatever you're aspiring to achieve. The imagery, you want the right word for the right emotion, for the right image, right? But I also think that there was a time I grew up, I'm old, so there was a time when I grew up, we had vocabulary tests, right? And spelling tests. So but it was not only just spelling tests, it was a spelling test where you had to have the definition of the word, and then you had to write the word in the sentence, had to have an understanding or grasp of the word. And that would then supplement the lack of reading, like perhaps if so because you had an encounter with this specific list, these definitions. So I would recommend when teachers are using our books specifically, then they go through the book and pick those words that you think children might not know, like sacrifice is one word in my book that shows up a lot. And then related back to a poem or related back to the story or the narrative, so that the word has meaning. I want to recommend that teachers start doing that. Some kind of way, implement a vocabulary lesson where they actually get the meaning of the word and use the words, hear themselves speak the word, write a poem with the word, right? And then I also want to recommend for facility with the language and hearing the language. It ain't nothing like hearing a poem spoken or a song. Kids like rap music. They like rap music because you can hear it, right? You're speaking it. It's rhythmic. It moves, right? So I also want to recommend that teachers start using more books, more poems, making kids memorize the poetry. So that also the words, talking about SEL, so that the words also can be a comfort and a salve and a balm when they are feeling upset, when they are in traffic with parents, somebody says something crazy to them. Do they have an arsenal of words that can comfort them? A poem that they can call up. Eloise Greenfield, one of the poets that I love, I love a lot of poets, but Eloise Greenfield, who recently died, she has a book called Honey, I Love. All the poems in that book, it's just medicine for the heart. Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, Maya Angelou, so incorporate poetry in your lessons, regardless of what field of study you're in. And then also incorporate using vocabulary words, study the root words, the base words, because that's missing from the curriculum, totally and completely missing from the curriculum. So then when they're having those tests, they got to take the test, but they don't have any understanding of root words, base words, suffixes, prefixes. They ain't got a clue. And then they fell in royally on the test because they just don't understand the language. But if they understood the language, if they understood words and how they work and what they mean, it would demystify all of that. And if you have them fall in love with the language, they'll pursue it. You don't have to like beat them on the head and like make them like, today I'm gonna make you learn these words. If they love language and love books and love writing and all of that good stuff, the humanities of it all, if they love it, you're not gonna have to fight them. Does anybody here, any writers here, Warren, Teresa, would you all like to read something from your books? Because we got like what? We got 5 minutes, Ben? How many minutes we got?
We have 5, and that's perfect. I was just DMing each of them to make sure they had a copy of their book nearby.
Okay.
Sure. Let's see. All right. So here's a copy of Brown Money.
Beautiful.
And so the book is full of pretty much all the artwork in the book are paintings that I did. The year I wrote the book, I did like 100 paintings. I just went paint crazy. I did like 100 paintings in 1 year. So let's see. So here's one of the images of the book. Another painting I did. This is supposed to be Jay's father, who's an engineer. And I go to, so like one of his images. this image here, where Jay basically is in this part right here, father basically tells him that he has multiple options and, you know, opportunities that he can travel down, or, you know, different roads that he can travel down as far as what his future will look like, ways that he can make, you know, a good living, ways that he can basically, you know, add to his own character. And so that image of just showing multiple roads and multiple lanes, and him having this map that's him having this map where it's showing, you know, no clear direction on where to go because there's so many options. And the reason I wanted to show that was just showing kids you have options. There's not one road to success. You can take, you know, multiple avenues. You know, you can take multiple lanes to get to that destination that you want to get to. So I believe that art is very supplemental when, you know, as far as getting the message across, because I think everybody reads every day, from a text message to an email, and you probably remember it more if there's a picture involved or there's some type of imagery involved, you know, because like I said earlier, you may not remember, you know, everything you were taught or, you know, things like that, but you remember what you felt. And you usually feel something when you see some type of image or a picture that kind of, you know, sinks into your subconscious for later. So.
Yeah. Okay, so this is, hold on, I gotta change my filter. I should have thought about that. Hold on. So my book is the background that you see right now. And let's see if I can hit none. It'll show it better. Okay, so this is my book, and all the feelings that we associate with anger are in this book. I was very intentional about vocabulary, so I hope you can see it, that the vocabulary words that I focused on, the feeling word is in red, and that it always it starts with how you might feel when you're annoyed and what you could do. So when I feel annoyed because someone is bothering me, instead of saying mean things, I give them another option. I take out my journal and draw and write all my thoughts. And then the bottom always ends with I am in control. So the last page, towards the back, I was also very intentional with putting all the vocabulary together, the feelings to know. I took the pictures and then I put it together. And then this comes with a coloring book too. So the next page after that are all the positive ways that you could respond to a temporary feeling. And so I had flashcards made with this. The images you see, I have 2 girls and 2 boys. So my illustrator at the time, she took this child looks like my children. So it's funny to see, even if you see the last page, which was every scenario that I gave in the book was a scenario that a child has given me that has happened with them. And so I've always end all my books with a statement that when I am in control, I can make better decisions. When I make better decisions, I feel happy and I can share my happiness with others. It is natural to get angry, but what matters most is how we handle it. I am in control.
And I don't know, do we have time? Oh yeah, we got 1 minute.
Yes, 1 minute.
All right, well, okay. All right. I'm the author of Memphis Martin and the Mountaintop. It's a book about Memphis, the sanitation strike, Dr. King's assassination. And there's a poem in the book that I'd love you to remember. And it goes like this. Repeat after me. You don't have to repeat after me, but you can say it in your heart. And I hope it makes you feel good. Dream big, walk tall, be strong, march on, don't quit, never stop. Don't quit, never stop, climb up the mountaintop. Thank you all. It was wonderful. Go to our websites and buy our books. Alice Faye Duncan, Warren Wilson, Teresa Ficklin, and Benjamin, our narrator. Buy our books. Don't forget about us.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that the audience has resources in their email for what they can do, where they can find your books, and just everywhere in Memphis they're available and online. So at this point, we're going to jump back into the next session. Oh, actually, it's 4:30. So I believe our next step is to wave you guys goodbye. And I hope that everyone joins us again at 1 p.m. tomorrow. You're going to use that same magic link that you got in your email to join today's session. It's going to be amazing. And as the one who wrote the trivia questions, I can guarantee that you guys attending this session gives you a much better chance to win a pair of AirPods or an iPad. So y'all made the right choice today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for having me.